Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH. Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson. President Trump is still working to get his full team in position at the USDA, but I had the chance last week to speak with Deputy Secretary of the USDA, Stephen Vaden. We talked about his short time so far in this administration and what he's watching as we get closer to harvest and the needs of farmers become more pronounced through this fall.
Well, it's fortunate that I served in the president's first term. That way I didn't need a map to get around the Witten or South buildings. But obviously we're seeing the same thing that producers out in the field are. We know we've got to have more markets opened up so producers can sell their goods. We know we need to be working on increasing domestic demand because whether it's international or domestic demand, that's the only thing that's going to get these commodity prices up. And we know they're way too low right now. We're also working on seeing to it that we get all the deregulatory initiatives that the president campaigned on and that the secretary has agreed to put in place, moving as quickly as possible so that we can remove these burdens from the American farmer, all the while serving as the ambassador, really, for rural America to our fellow cabinet agencies to let them know how they can help rural America and increase rural prosperity both on farm and off the farm with their own policy areas.
And of course, you'll be really taking the pulse of rural America next week during the Farm Progress Show when you'll be coming to Decatur on Tuesday, as I understand it, to address the crowd. Stephen, what's going to be on your mind when you talk to the folks of the Farm Progress Show?
Well, of course, I'll be talking about some of the things that we have achieved through the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, bringing tax certainty to the American farmer, putting the death tax to rest for nearly all American farmers, allowing them to continue immediately expensing many of their on-farm investments, as well as not to mention plussing up reference prices to actually reflect the increasing cost of production that all our farmers are seeing so that we have a real rather than a fictional farm safety net going forward. But the primary thing that I want to do is not so much talk, but to listen. As you noted, it's vitally important for me and for this department to hear from the people who are responsible for feeding all of us so that I can communicate their concerns and their needs to the secretary and the rest of the administration so that we can put out the best policies possible to see to it that rural America joins in the prosperity that urban America has experienced for the past several years.
That's a great point. And of course, there's a lot of farm machinery at the Farm Progress Show, Deputy Secretary. You might get the chance to drive a tractor. Now, do you have a preference, red or green?
Well, that is a loaded question, as you know. As a matter of fact, I was up in Minnesota not that long ago. I was wearing a green and yellow Make Agriculture Great Again hat, and somebody came up to me and said, "Do you have one of those in red and white?" And as of yesterday, I'm happy to say I do. So I don't have to play favorites. So I may have to drive two tractors in order not to make a divisive decision when I visit you in Decatur.
That's what it's all about, listening to the people and keeping them happy out here in rural America. Deputy Secretary Stephen Vaden, thank you so much for joining us this weekend to fill us in on what's ahead, and we look forward to talking to you at the Farm Progress Show next week in Decatur, Illinois.
Looking forward to seeing you and everyone else there in Illinois in person.
Our market segment this week is brought to you by Farm Futures. Keep up on these volatile commodity markets at farmfutures.com. Joining me now to break down what's happening in the world of commodities is Mike Zuzolo, founder of Global Commodity Analytics. And Mike, thanks for talking with us this week.
Great to be with you again, Mike. Thank you for having me.
Let's dive into the corn market. We've seen prices claw back most of their losses following last week's USDA report. Mike, export demand, is it staying strong in the corn market?
It is, and I think this is where the USDA is recognizing that. They took us down to the old crop levels of about 1.3 billion bushels. That helped a lot with that monster yield and acreage increase they gave us, giving us just a little over 2 billion, 2.1 billion bushel new crop carryover. We could, I think, Mike, at this stage, maybe shave that back towards below 2 billion bushel carryover. I'm just not there yet based upon client updates and some of the graphics that I'm getting from producers, especially in the central corn belt, but even out closer to me in states like Nebraska. I think the Pro Farmer Tour is picking up what I'm hearing in the Western Corn Belt. Probably could have done a Southern Leg Tour again this year when it comes to Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, as far as picking up maybe a little bit more negative yield potential. in the corn. But I think you hit it. I mean, the demand story is definitely in the corn, both in terms of ethanol demand crush and also the export demand just is not backing down. Another big weekly export sale this week of about 2.86 million metric tons. So maybe, just maybe, we've been low enough, long enough in the corn, especially, and in the wheat, which is still the leader, the one that's pulling the corn down, that we're trying to carve out this low.
All right, Mike, speaking of both corn and wheat, of course, it's not just North America heading for harvest. Eastern Europe is as well, and Ukraine. Are we seeing their production come back to anywhere near what it was pre-Russian invasion?
Yeah, I don't think we are at this stage. I think the trade, it's interesting you bring that up, Mike, because both from a standpoint geopolitically of the Russia-Ukraine peace deal and the crop size in Russia and Ukraine for grains, I think the trade has taken the least path of resistance, and that is take prices lower, assuming A, we will get peace, and B, we've got a big crop coming. And the USDA, increased the new crop Ukrainian corn production in this past month's report. I still think there's a pretty good chance that those two factors are going to have to be readdressed in the marketplace, and the prices therefore may have to react. And that may even come before the September crop report, just because, like them, they're in a weather market right now, very dry in some key areas, and we'll, I think, know a lot more about the peace negotiations by the end of this month.
That's a really good point. That is still very much in flux. Mike, you mentioned we could see some help on the corn side from wheat. We've been watching that market just deteriorate really all summer long. Are we putting in a low?
I think we are, Mike. I think the dollar is doing a lot of heavy lifting right now on the demand side for the United States. And I think the question I keep asking myself, going back to the Black Sea, is why is France selling wheat into Egypt and Tunisia? Obviously, part of it is price, but why is the Russian price low? Why isn't Russia getting that business right now? And so if we stay on that track of decent export sales here in the United States and the European market gaining more market share away from Black Sea, kind of answers the question as to whether the crop is there, if you ask me. So right now, what we've seen in the wheat market in the short term is a new weekly high. We've been able to go within about a penny of last year's low in August of last year in soft red wheat. And it's a strong sense of deja vu with the August 24 time period, what we're dealing with right now, and all the grains, and including the wheat, and the fact that also the beans have been able to lead us higher, just like they did last year at this time.
All right, lots to go. Of course, we've got a little bit of the month of August left. We've got some more soybeans with some heat. We've got corn harvest yet to run. There's a lot to discuss in these markets, not to mention what's coming with cattle. We'll be back with more with Mike Zuzolo from Global Commodity Analytics. Our market segment this week is brought to you by Farm Futures. Keep up on these volatile commodity markets at farmfutures.com. Joining us to get into these markets is Mike Zuzolo of Global Commodity Analytics. And Mike, we talked corn and wheat in the first segment. Here, I want to take a look at soybeans. We've seen the futures market hold on to its gains following last week's report, but I'm curious about basis. What are you watching for your farmers here as we get into harvest?
Yeah, this is an important piece of the puzzle, I think, especially as we get into the off the combine sales and harvest, Mike, and that is the trade in not just the beans, but the corn and wheat also has been trading a U.S. supply-demand balance sheet instead of a world supply-demand balance sheet. So the futures market is looking at tighter U.S. soybean ending stocks, bigger corn and wheat U.S. ending stocks. But if you flip that upside down, the cash basis is looking at the exact opposite. It's facing the reality of what we've seen with no China sales in soybeans. It's facing the fact that we do have big crops in South America, both in Argentina and Brazil, that's taking market share right now from the U.S. in soybeans. And so that soybean basis is really critical because it's priced in. Out here in this part of the country, I've seen 80 under at this point for fall basis, Mike. And this is where the crop tour, the August weather really comes into play. If we get a futures rally up towards 1075, say in November beans, that's a pretty decent price level. That gets you back to the June highs. If you to take into consideration the idea that we do have a decent crop, but maybe not a record, is it a good idea that we maybe sell the future side of the equation, but leave the basis open in case we stay dry the rest of August, and then see if that basis can't lift itself up a little bit, maybe 20, maybe 30 cents. Again, kind of like what we saw last year with the market thinking we had such a big supply, but then the basis really came storming back.
All right, let the basis do the work out in the countryside, Mike. Speaking of the countryside, I've seen reports all week long of sale barns all across the middle of this country hitting new records, particularly on calf sales. We're also seeing very strong fat cattle prices continuing. This cattle market is on fire. Mike, what's driving this strength here this week?
I think the biggest thing is it continues to be the screwworm issue in Mexico. Last month, and into the first of this month, I think it was more about the Brazilian tariffs and the Brazilian beef market essentially being shut down because of the high tariffs. But this month, Mike, I think we really picked it up because Mexican cattle ranchers are now wanting their southern border closed to countries like Nicaragua, Guatemala, El Salvador. And this is because of the lack of control on the screwworm coming into Mexico. And what this says to the trade is, we don't think USDA is going to open the border anytime soon. Maybe it was a couple months, maybe it was 3 months. Now with this new information, we really don't know. So let's take the market parabolically higher, essentially straight up. That indicates let's cut demand off at the legs because we don't have enough supply like we thought we would in a couple, 3 months.
But Mike, the question is, are we cutting demand off at the legs? It sounds as if consumers are still out there buying choice beef over $400. Can this continue?
You're right. We've got way too many features at fast food restaurants, even sit-down restaurants really featuring the beef right now, Mike. I think we're cutting demand off, but clearly the market doesn't think we're doing it fast enough. And I think that's where another period outside of summer grilling season, that's probably going to do a lot of help. I think the other thing that I keep going back to, we talked about before, as long as 401ks and Wall Street are doing well, the wealth effect is still there. So Wall Street becomes more and more important as we hit these new record highs.
That's a great point. And Mike, broader consumer economy looks strong, at least for the next couple of months.
Yeah, it does. I am very nervous about interest rates not coming down, though. I do think that the president has a point. He's pounding the table pretty strongly about cutting interest rates. Why would that be? Because I do think they're going to impact us as we get into Q4 and as we get into Q1 of 2026. That's the biggest thing I think to look forward to as far as what slows us down economically.
Lots to watch as we get deeper into harvest. Mike Zuzolo, Global Commodity Analytics, thanks for joining us this week.
Great to be with you, Mike.
Agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead.
This weather segment is brought to you by SprayTech, making your spray applications effective and convenient. Use it once, trust it always. Greg Solier joins us now with a look at what's to come from the weather perspective in the week ahead. And Greg, it's been dry, it's been hot in the Pacific Northwest. Any relief coming?
Limited relief, but again, it's more or less these dry base thunderstorms that will kick up some lightning, and then you're off to the races again, dealing with fires. We've seen them in Washington State, down into Utah, parts of Colorado and Arizona. So there are myriad of fronts on the maps and charts, none of which are expected to generate any substantial widespread meaningful moisture. A couple of scattered showers, thunderstorms on this boundary. Note the change into a very mild air mass across those spring grain areas, making good progress, by the way, a good 20 to 30% improvement with harvest of the spring grains for the Canadian Prairie and the Dakotas over the past week to 10 days. Stray shower coming ashore into the Pacific Northwestern areas of Washington State, and we get a little push of some of this heat back into the plains, maybe a couple of showers and thunderstorms, pretty mild and quiet across the southern Canadian Prairie. A bit of a drop off in temperatures, which some days are up around 100, other days are more manageable with an outdoor work and livestock standpoint scenario. So that's the story in the northwestern part of the country. Really no big headlines otherwise, and other than what we've been experiencing much of the summertime season. The main hot ridge retrograding back into the southwestern states, and just enough instability and moisture to trip off some of the monsoon showers and thunderstorms. Nice influx of mild air, and recent rains have again improved topsoil moisture. Not great, but some localized improvement to dryness and drought where it still lingered across parts of the central and southern plains. Very little change. Warm and hot air begin to work back into the central plains. A couple of thunderstorm clusters here. Hot weather centered across the four corners. Seasonal temperatures, if not a bit of a cool off, slated for the valleys of California. Nothing unusual for this stretch in summertime in August in the southwest.
Well, it is summertime in August in the Midwest. Greg, Farm Progress Show is next week. How's it looking?
For a change, comfortable, manageable, dare I say cool. dare I say, grab a jacket in the morning hours. You can thank Hurricane Aaron for this brief pattern shift across the middle part of the country. In any event, here's the next kind of reinforcing cold front. And boy, we really need some dry time in pockets over some of these northwestern through central Corn Belt locales. And there are still some other areas that are a bit too dry. A couple of sprinkles on this boundary. That is it, with progressively cooler, less humid, low dew point air back into play for the Corn Belt areas, including farm progress. Temperatures in the 70s by day, 50s at night at Decatur, Illinois. Unheard of for this point in summertime, but the heat, though, is lurking across the high plains areas, and we will get back into hotter and drier and warmer as we get into and approach the harvest season. Still a pretty good fetch of moisture across the Rio Grande, part of the monsoon setup. A boundary here across the Gulf Coast, even a drop off in temperature and humidity levels, and coming off recent rain and the heat wave as well into Arkansas. That is much appreciated, and little change expected. Very comfortable late summertime environs across the Mid-South Delta region. Scattered showers and thunderstorms across Texas. The core of the heat where it should be, Mike, for this time of the year in the desert Southwest.
For folks out east, do they get a bit of a respite after Hurricane Aaron's moved along?
Yeah, and boy, I tell you, those coastal sections of the mid-Atlantic region, the Outer Banks, Cape Hatteras, and points north and eastward took a pretty good lashing. Things for now in the at least western Atlantic are quiet from a tropical standpoint. Here's the next cold front on the move, and there may be a feel of early autumn in the air, dare I say, for some folks into the northeast of New England. Delightful outdoor work, some moderate to heavy dew for some of those fourth cutting of haying operations across the Midwest. Here's a warm front across the Plain States area, stripping off a little spotty moisture north of the Twins. Otherwise, very quiet, very comfortable, very uneventful across much of the Corn Belt and the northeast of New England compared to what we've seen here in weeks gone by. And even a push of cooler, drier in the wake of Aaron into the mid-Atlantic and the Carolinas. Scattered showers, thunderstorms, the heat back west of the Mississippi Valley. And with that in mind, here comes maybe a tropical system in through Florida. Scattered showers and thunderstorms there. Heat and humidity continue back westward into Texas. We'll have that 4-week forecast coming up later on in the broadcast.
Closed captioning this week is brought to you by Farm Progress. Their team of experts reports on innovative solutions and essential information for your farm business. Visit farmprogress.com to stay updated. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to This Week in Agribusiness. Now, this past week in the export sales report from the U.S. government, we were notified that soybeans were selling, but one big buyer wasn't on that list yet, and that's China. The American Soybean Association is working to get that recognized in the White House, and joining me now is Steve Sensky. He serves as president of the American Soybean Association. And Steve, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, great to be with you, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Now, the lack of soybean sales to China for this upcoming marketing year, Steve, this is a real challenge for soybean growers, isn't it?
It really is. China is the biggest buyer of soybeans in the world. They import more soybeans than the rest of the world combined. And traditionally, we export about 50% of the soybean crop is exported overseas, and over 50% of our exports go to China. The problem now is because of retaliatory tariffs and the trade war with China, China has not purchased any new crop soybeans, where traditionally they have purchased quite a bit already. And it's really getting worrisome for soybean farmers that as we quickly are approaching harvest here, that we don't have any China sales on the books. So we have raised that in a plea to President Trump to say, hey, please include soybeans as you're negotiating with China. Please include soybeans, because we are the largest agriculture export overall, and we are the largest agriculture export to China. And while the administration is prioritizing and is negotiating with China on critical minerals, on Boeing jets, on computer chips, we also want to add soybeans to that list. And that was really the purpose of our plea to President Trump and top U.S. government officials.
That's a great point. Now, Steve, of course, time will tell whether or not we'll be able to see soybeans inside a purchase deal like we did back in the phase 1 of 2020. But if we don't, that domestic demand becomes so essential. Let's talk about the policies that we've seen come out so far. We do have an update to the 45Z policy. Is that going to help promote soybean usage here domestically?
Yeah, it will. Two things there, really. I mean, biofuels are just a great area of source of demand for soybean oil. About of the soybeans that are crushed domestically, about half of the oil goes into the human food market, and the other half goes into biofuels. And so what we have seen in recent years is just really low renewable volume obligations. And that has shuttered biodiesel plants, has really reduced demand. We've also seen a lot of imports of like used cooking oil, beef tallow, things like that. And through the policies that the administration is pursuing, one is we have a very robust and very aggressive renewable volume obligations that have been proposed under the RFS, and we want the Trump administration to finalize those. And EPA intends to do that by the end of October. So we're really pushing for those to be finalized. And then under 45Z, what you mentioned, Mike, under the tax credit, it reduces it makes imported use cooking oil, beef tallow that are outside of North America ineligible. And so we think that will help restore demand for soybean oil as well.
That is crucial. We have seen huge volumes of those imported, whether it's waste cooking oil or other products coming in from overseas, that it's competing directly with U.S. growers. Steve, what's your message to soybean growers as we try to push these twin political ends to the end? We got to grow exports and we've got to grow domestic demand. What should bean growers be thinking as they get in their combines this fall?
Yeah, I think it is exactly that, Mike. We need both. We need both the export demand and we need domestic markets. And, ASA is fighting to make sure that soybean farmers have access to both. And, we really want soybean growers to engage. We want soybean growers to contact their elected officials to let them know that we need both. We need exports. We need China as the largest soybean purchaser in the world back in the fold. We need to make sure that we include that in the negotiations so that we get a deal on soybeans. And then, of course, we need to work on the domestic demand, and we need EPA to finalize, really what were very good proposed volumes under the RFS.
It was nice to see those volumes come up. It's good to see that EPA is backing demand for strong products coming out of rural America. And of course, ASA, Steve, not just focused on policy, also working on making sure that soybean growers across the country are connected to the latest information. And to that end, I'm very excited to be working with the ASA on the Farmer Forum, happening on Monday, August 25th at the Mount Zion Convention Center. This is a great way for farmers to kind of get together and learn a little bit more about the industry, isn't it, Steve?
It sure is, and it really is about, there's so many carbon programs and sustainability programs out there, and it takes time for farmers to try to evaluate those. And the purpose of our Farmer Forum is to bring together a lot of the experts, a lot of the companies that are implementing these programs, and have other experts there to help farmers evaluate those programs and see what's going to work best on their operation. And so it's really exciting. We're very pleased to offer this. There's going to be an opportunity to hear from some speakers from a lot of the programs and experts that can help inform farmers on how to do that. And then we're also going to have the opportunity for what I call a little bit of speed dating, where farmers will be able to sit down and meet with some of the companies that are offering these programs and ask them questions. It's going to be a great opportunity to learn, and it's going to be excellent.
It sure will. I had the chance to participate last year. I learned a lot, folks. Visit soygrowers.com if you'd like to get registered. Again, it's Mount Zion Convention Center on Monday, August 25th. We'd love to see you there. Steve Senske, thanks so much for joining us this week.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Pioneer, the one that started it all and the one to count on when every bushel counts. Plant the 100th season at pioneer.com/100.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. The EPA is really on board with biodiesel and renewable diesel production. In fact, they now expect almost 6 billion gallons to be used next year for blending. I talked with Kurt Kovarik, Vice President of Federal Affairs at Clean Fuels Alliance America, about whether or not agriculture was ready to meet that demand.
We're pleased to see that EPA has a confidence in us. And the reason that we're also confident that we can meet this is because we have the capacity built online with biodiesel, renewable diesel, and sustainable aviation fuel producers. We've doubled the industry capacity since 2020. And following along with that has been a $6 billion investment by the oilseed crush industry to expand and improve and increase the volume of soybeans and canola that's crushed domestically so that we can have access to both that meal for our livestock and other food uses and oil available for both the food industry and the biodiesel industry. And we see those announcements and groundbreakings and ribbon cuttings all over the United States, primarily in the upper Midwest, which is fantastic for a soybean farmer. Right now, we're adding about 10% to the value of a soybean. And as your soybean farmers know, commodity prices are not great right now. And that's because of a lot of headwinds in international markets. So we're very pleased to see the Trump administration's commitment to rural economic development, ensuring commodities here at home. And that's exactly what the biomass-based diesel industry does, is we add value to that soybean oil. We want them to crush those beans here at home rather than ship them across the globe. Helps our livestock industry and it helps our biodiesel industry.
Anytime we can add value domestically, it's good news for America's farmers. EPA is looking at a number of technical changes to get this done. Kurt, what kind of adjustments would you like to see from Clean Fuels Alliance perspective?
Well, the top priority is to ensure that they maintain the robust volumes. They acknowledged significant step change was necessary from a lackluster RVO, that renewable volume obligation that the Biden administration set. So we're hopeful that they maintain that. They've also made a couple technical changes. All we're simply asking for is they maintain integrity of the program, ensure that there is no erosion through any of these technical changes that would harm our market or harm our producers. And very importantly, they've got a big decision to make on what are called small refiner exemptions. Obligated parties who don't want to comply with the program want to be exempted from it. To some extent, maybe they have an argument, but at the end of the day, the volumes of fuel, renewable fuel, need to be maintained. They need to be absorbed by other obligated parties so that the American soybean farmer and biodiesel producer aren't left holding the bag when it comes to exempting these volumes. So we need to be held whole. We think EPA is going to make a decision on this sometime yet this August. So I would suggest to folks be paying attention. We don't want refiners to win out over farmers and erode these volumes that are so aggressive and so positively welcomed by our industry.
That was Kurt Kovarik with Clean Fuels Alliance America. To learn more, visit their website, cleanfuels.org.
Agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier returns now with his extended farm weather forecast for the country.
This weather segment is brought to you by SprayTech, making your spray applications effective and convenient. Use it once, trust it always. Greg Solier is back with a look at what's to come over the next 4 weeks. And Greg, next week looks pretty dry from a precip perspective.
Yeah, we're going to carry the potential, though, for a system via the tropics through the eastern Gulf. If this materializes down here, yeah, later in the week and the following weekend, we may get a outer band of moisture up to about the I-70 corridor. If this does not happen, or there's a track more into the western and southwestern Atlantic, well, lots of the Corn Belt high and dry, just spotty moisture downwind of the Great Lakes areas into the northeast and New England. Some pretty good downpours, parts of the southwest. Some of that moisture may work into the Pacific Northwest, but a good part of the plains and Corn Belt locales will continue high and dry. For some areas of the Midwest, we actually need a few days worth of dry time.
Midwestern growers should expect the cool down to persist for the first full week of September?
Yeah, but no concern about late season crop growth and development. Very comfortable for outdoor chores, haying operations, the fourth cutting of the season, maybe a little slower curing rates. Normal temperatures here, warmth across the west down through areas of southern Texas and all the way out into the valleys of California. It'll be this expanding area of dry time that by and large will park itself here and points westward in the weeks to come. But whenever we get a tropical system in the eastern Gulf, wetter weather for the eastern states, and still a pretty active storm track up through the northern Great Lakes region and back into the Pacific Northwest.
What's your crystal ball show for the week of September 8th?
Plenty of summertime still on the weather maps and charts. 85, maybe some 90-degree air as far north as, the Black Hills. Warmth across the Corn Belt locales, a little bit below average in the southwest with a pickup on some moisture via the tropics and the monsoon setup. Look at the expanding dry time. Good moisture reduction, dry down. Yeah, think about early harvest. We got a system up and down the eastern seaboard. Some wet weather there and some welcome moisture for the Pacific Northwest too.
Does that hot weather stick around through the middle of September?
Yeah, I think so by and large here. And here it is, the middle part of the country, jet stream well to the north. The only time we're going to get any substantial cool off is if we get a tropical system to wind its way with action up the west coast. And we may begin to see that as we get deeper on into mid or even late September, beginning part of October. But wet weather far east across the deep south. Dry weather continues on for outdoor work across the northern and central plains. Much of the Corn Belt back into worrisome drought conditions as well into the Pacific Northwest. So a pretty active weather pattern tropical wise across the Atlantic that continues on here in the months to come.
Our Farm Progress Update is sponsored by Brandt Industries. Lead the field with Brandt's lineup of heavy-duty grain carts and make the most of your harvest season. Visit brandt.ca for more. Well, it's no surprise we are very excited for next week's Farm Progress Show in Decatur, Illinois. And Matt Youngman, the National Events Director with Farm Progress, took time out of his very busy schedule this weekend to join us with an update. Matt, things are really happening on the show grounds this weekend, aren't they?
Yes, they are. You can feel the energy as the show site grows. The loading dock is a very busy place right now as we get this thing built.
Of course, we've been watching the crops in the field all year long, Matt. We're now in that home stretch. How's everything shaping up?
You know, that it's been the perfect year for our field demo crop. It got in on time and it got lots of heat and some rains showed up. It was dry early and then some rains showed up to save it. But we got lots of heat and everything is in great shape. We took the first few loads of corn off Wednesday, the week before the show, and it was testing just over 20%. I think the average was about 20.6 and it was 56-pound test weight. And I'm hearing about 200 to 225 for yield, which for 87-day corn in central Illinois is pretty respectable. So we're excited. Everything is coming together really, really well for field demonstrations. Couldn't be going better there.
Fantastic. That'll be a good test on all that equipment running through both the heavy yields and the heavy residue. Matt, you've got folks on the grounds this weekend. It's a hub of activity. What are they doing here before the show kicks off?
Well, it's kind of the transition point between the infrastructure going in, the tents, the electricity, internet, all those kind of things, and then the exhibitors showing up and doing their finishing touches, parking the equipment, getting things set up, and then Monday, the day before the show, most of the 10x10 booths and those things will get set up. But the show kind of doubles every day here as we approach the show in terms of the quantity of things out there and the work that's being done. It really peaks on Monday, the day before the show.
Of course, Matt, now we're also close enough to get a really solid feel for the weather outlook this week. And what are you watching?
Yeah, it's looking good. And the thing about the long-term forecast is it's been really steady. A lot of times that'll vary as you're looking far out, but it has been perfect. The forecast has been perfect since it was a 14-day forecast. And now as we're within a week of the show and a few days of the show, the forecast could not be better. Highs in the upper 70s. And virtually zero chance of any rain that would do anything more than dust control. Some sprinkles wouldn't hurt anything at all. So we're in great shape for 3 beautiful days. And I hope everybody will take a few days off before harvest and come and look around. There's some really fantastic product introductions happening, some secrets that are going to be unveiled on Tuesday morning. So we're excited for Farm Progress Show this year. And
Matt, we can still get advance tickets on the website. Is that right?
That is exactly right. So farmprogressshow.com, you can buy your advance tickets. They're $25 at the gate or $15 in advance plus fees. So welcome everybody to check out the agenda and the maps and make your plan.
Fantastic. farmprogressshow.com. Get those tickets bought. Matt Youngman, we'll see you next week at Farm Progress Show.
Thanks, Mike.
Now on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, where we spotlight another great American farm tractor. In the Tractor Shed this weekend, I show you some fine-looking equipment from the Half Century of Progress show at Rantoul, Illinois. You'll rarely see a mounted corn picker from back in the 50s looking as fine as this one. Oh, and then there's the tractor under it. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Lundell Plastics. From Odebold, Iowa, they make those quality poly plastic products to help bring efficiency to your farm. They will be at the Farm Progress Show, Vance Lundell and his team, booth 515 at the Farm Progress Show in the week ahead. That's LundellPlastics.com. Well, many of us, when we see an old mounted picker, we start to break out into a sweat, or we think about how cold it could be working in among that machinery. But whatever the weather was, there was the chaff, there was the dust. At the end of the day, you knew you had done a day's work. But take a look at this finely restored machine. This is a Minneapolis Moline owned by a couple at Brookston, Indiana. Bill and Debbie Westfall of Brookston have this UB tractor. It's a 1954, but the mounted picker is a 54 also, a two-row Model RJ. The Minneapolis Moline Company made equipment, of course, at Minneapolis, Minnesota, Moline, Illinois. They had a storied existence extending over about 5 decades until they became part of the White Farm Equipment Company. A very nice setup. Oh, and I didn't even mention the wagon of the setup of those folks from Brookston, Indiana. In the week ahead, quite a bit of action on Big Iron, and some we're watching closely, by the way. Mark Stock now with a weekly report from Big Iron Auctions.
Well, hello, Max. Next week is the Farm Progress Show in Decatur, Illinois, and we will have auctions going on underneath our tent, and we'll have a lot of classic pickup trucks and collector tractors parked around the Big Iron and Sullivan booth. But we start August the 26th with a no reserve dealer and farmer machinery auction. Over 800 items will be selling. And on Wednesday, August the 27th, Mitchell Equipment Company from Humphrey, Nebraska will sell late model combines and corn heads. Rex and Bonnie Ludke, they are retiring their equipment by Gresham, Nebraska. 42 items, featuring a John Deere 4560 and a hard-to-find John Deere 4250 tractor. On Thursday, August the 28th, the John Deere Partnership Auction. Equipment from P&K Midwest, Western Equipment LLC, and Van Wall Equipment Inc. will sell. Also, August the 28th, the Steve and Carol Hoover Retirement Sale, equipment located by Abilene, Kansas. 92 items, featuring a Gleaner S98 Combine, New Holland TJ 375 four-wheel drive tractor. Max, your Super M tractor is parked in the Sullivan Big Iron booth, and it will sell on the Classic Tractor Auction on Wednesday, August 27th, along with other classic and collector tractors and an outstanding lineup of collector pickup trucks.
Our FFA Chapter Tribute is brought to you by Geringoff. Check out the new XFR 50 Draper with 3 times more flexibility than the closest competitor at Geringoff.com. Geringoff, proudly built in the American heartland. This week, we're getting to know the FFA president for Nebraska State FFA. It's Jake Rezach for the upcoming school year. And Jake, thanks for joining us.
Yes, absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about your background. Did you grow up on a farm or a ranch there in Nebraska?
Yes, I've grown up on a farm. I've been working on the farm since I was probably 6 years old. Jumped in a tractor when I was about 10 and never really had any doubts about what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, for sure.
So FFA was an easy fit, Jake, but what made you want to serve in leadership for the FFA?
Yeah, I would say just back home, my chapter, when I started to get involved in it, and my sophomore year, I ran for the officer position, and there's only 7 of us that ran, so all of us got one, which is pretty nice. But that really just kind of jump-started me, and I got to look into like what FFA really is about, and that just grew my love for it. And then once my senior year rolled around, I was the president of my chapter, and I loved that leadership role. And my advisor asked me, what do you think about trying out for state office? And I was like, oh, well, yeah, I'll try out for it. Like, see what happens. I mean, it'll be cool to try out. And then I ended up getting it. So that was great. But it's really just comes down to getting involved at a young age and realizing that this is what it's all about. And then just growing my love for it.
Growing that love, of course, is important. You'll spend this next year supervising the Nebraska State FFA, and then your future plans, Jake, do you hope to stay on the farm?
Yeah, so for my future plans, I'd love to stay on the farm for the rest of my life. I know that way that farming is going, and I think everyone can kind of see it. I would also like to start a business of some sort. I don't know what that'll be yet, but something that I can do on the side too to support what I'm doing on the farm.
Fantastic. Jake Rezach, thank you so much for talking with us this week.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Well, folks, it's farm show season. Farm Progress, of course, next week in Decatur, Illinois. Half Century of Progress happening right now in Rantoul, Illinois. And last week, Chad Colby had the chance to see the latest sprayer technology at the Maggie Show. He joins us now with an update from the grounds.
Well, this week down in Bloomington, Illinois was the annual Maggie Show hosted by the Illinois Fertilizer and Chemical Association. Kevin, huge crowd here in Bloomington this week.
Huge crowd, 80 degrees, sunshine, and no humidity. It makes for a good crowd and a lot of good technology out here people want to see.
Kevin, talk a little bit about what you heard at this year's show. There's a lot of conversation about smart spray and legislation and all kinds of stuff. What's on your desk as far as some of the things you heard at the show this year?
Absolutely, a lot of stuff going on. A lot about See and Spray, a lot of technology on the boom with all companies. Also, they're talking about the fertilizer prices. What does that look like going into the fall, especially with some of the phosphate numbers that are coming out? But also legislatively, got a good win down at the Illinois State Capitol. We are going to get continuous education for all applicators. As you guys know already, right now you take that test every 3 years. If you've taken that test going into the future, you're able to take continuous education and keep that license going.
Well, that's big news in Illinois. Hopefully they expand that across the Midwest. Kevin, field demonstrations here. That's a huge thing at the Maggie Show.
Back there, we got 40 acres of ride and drive, and all the major sprayer companies bring sprayers, not just in their static booths, but actually do ride and drive. So anybody, whoever you are, can get in a sprayer. And it's not just your big three like you think of anymore. All companies are bringing new sprayers. Horsch's got a huge sprayer out there. All of the companies are going to bigger sprayers, but also a lot of technology on the booth. It's just not bigger. It's more technology on that boom of that sprayer.
Kevin, next year will be your 45th year.
Yeah.
I see the grin on your face already.
We're always thinking out. We're always thinking a couple years out. 45 years will be a big one. We missed it in the COVID year, but we're going to have it. Hopefully, the good Lord will give us as great as weather we're having this year. But we already got big plans to expanding and even maybe doing a little more ride and drive areas than we already have.
For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Well, thank you, Chad, as always, for that update on technology. We look forward to crossing paths next week in Decatur. And folks, stick around. Before we go for the week, we're going to learn about a partnership between Kubota and a Florida farmer. Leave it here. Well, it won't be long now, and farmers across the country will be making laps around their field at harvest. But one farmer's been busy making laps for the past several months. That's Ross Chastain. He's the driver of the #1 Kubota car in NASCAR, and he joins us now. Ross, thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
Yeah, good to jump on here with you.
So this partnership with Kubota, this is not the first year. You guys have been doing this for a while. What brought it together?
Oh, my love for agriculture. I'm a 8th generation watermelon farmer, and my family has been in South Florida for a few generations now, and we've specialized in watermelons, and it's what we've stuck to now. And I wanted to surround my career in NASCAR with agriculture as much as I could. And when we met the folks at Kubota a few years ago, that was we hit the ground running together. We aligned well with what we wanted to do and tell some farming stories of farms across this country, and also put their tractors to work at our farm. So it's been a perfect match for me.
So how have the Kubota machines performed on the family's farm down there in Florida?
It's good. We're in mostly sugar sand, and we start getting our fields ready in October, November, and December. And we put our first plants in the ground in really the first week of January. The only reason we're in South Florida is for the warm weather. It's not for really any other reason of my great-grandfather moved the family from South Georgia to South Florida in the 1950s for that earlier watermelon crop that he heard about and the good prices the Florida farmers were getting. So now, as we've put down roots, and pun intended, the M6 141 is a tractor we use. It's one of Kubota's larger tractors, and we use that for a variety of things. But in our watermelon crop, we're in mainly like large grid pattern fields. In the neighborhood of about 400 acres per field. And so there's plastic mulch beds that we have to put down, and then we transplant our plants from the greenhouse onto those plastic mulch beds first week of January, and then it's about 100-day growing season from there. So they've been good. Orange looks good on a watermelon farm.
Well, that's good to hear. And do you get back to the farm a lot to help out on the operation?
Oh, I mean, look, my job these days is to race and talk about farming. In December, that is part of our off season, with our final race being the first week of November and our first race being around the first week of February or second week. That leaves December and January to not have to worry about going fast on the weekends. So that does mean I go to Florida there for the holidays, Christmas and everything, to see my family. And like to stay out in one of our camps on the farm and just kind of unplug from the NASCAR world for a month. Still get my training in and still do a lot of things, but that's my month to kind of wake up. And if I want to go drive a tractor, I can. And my brother and dad, my family, they'll let me. I'm kind of in the way, I'll be honest, because I'm not there all year. So at a working farm, at one like ours, it has to run efficiently. There's not a lot of room for people being in the way, and I can promise you in December I'm in the way, but they kind of let me have my time.
Well, Ross, thank you so much for taking the time to join us to fill us in on the partnership between you and Kubota, and we wish you the best of luck as this NASCAR season comes to an end in November.
All right, thanks.
Well, folks, now's your chance to race to your computer. Visit farmprogressshow.com and get those advance tickets ordered for the Farm Progress Show in Decatur. We look forward to seeing you in just a few days. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here today. Be sure to catch us next time, right here for This Week in Agribusiness. This Week in Agribusiness is recorded in the Strauss Studios. For more than 70 years and 3 generations, Strauss has been manufacturing high-performance, German-engineered workwear, work boots, and safety equipment. Prepare for the next growing season at Strauss.com.
This Week in Agribusiness is produced by 22 Creative Group and has been a presentation of Farm Progress Broadcast. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.